Hi everyone, I'm Charlotte Williams, Social Value Manager at PSR. Today, we're really proud to launch our Diversity Data Benchmarking Report for 2025, and we brought together a group of expert voices from our AMS Diversity and Inclusion Alliance, a group of organisations working at the forefront of inclusive recruitment to unpack the data, explore what it means for the public sector, and offer practical insights that you can take away today. This is the second year of our benchmarking report. It's based on data collected from the PSR contingent workforce and compares it to national averages like the civil service permanent employee data and private sector benchmarks. We've seen some consistency in areas like disability and ethnicity representation this year, but also gaps in representation on other groups. And we're going to be exploring what that means, what's working, and where the real opportunities for change lie with our partners today. So, without further ado, Andy, I'd like to come to you first. If you could tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself and your organisation, and I'd really like to hear what stood out to you most in this year's report, and if there's anything that surprised or concerned you and why.
Thanks very much, Charlotte, and good morning or good afternoon to anybody who is dialing in. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of today's panel. So I'm Andy Simpson. I'm the Commercial Director for 55 Redefined. We are a business that helps large organisations attract, grow and engage over 50s talent and consumers. And we do that through the provision of workforce solutions and age intelligence. But turning perhaps more importantly to your question, Charlotte, I guess on behalf of perhaps everybody you're going to hear from today, the first statement I'd like to make is that there is no competition on inclusion. And whilst you're going to hear from 4 or 5 different people today, I'm sure I can speak for everyone when we say this is not a competition, it's just a massive opportunity. When we turn to this year's report, I think the first observation I'd make, and perhaps closely aligned to age, inclusion and diversity, is that the data isn't so much surprising, Charlotte, but perhaps more of a clear endorsement of age as a growing strategic imperative. The data that you've kindly put together and sourced clearly shows that certainly within the next 5 years, 50% of the UK workforce will be over 50. And if that's not scary enough, the first millennial turns 50 in less than 6 years. I know, quite scary. And I guess what that means to me and us here at 55 Redefined is that if organisations don't have an age strategy, then they realistically don't have a growth strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, and that figure is really scary, isn't it? Within only a few years, 50% of the workforce is going to be made up of older workers, and organisations really need to have a look at what they're doing to support that growing talent pool. So yeah, completely hear what you're saying there, Andy. Thank you. And Natalie, I'd like to come to you next, if that's okay. If you could tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself, and really keen to hear what your thoughts are about the representation of disabled workers in the data. I mean, when we looked at it, the data and the national averages, it remained twice that of the private sector, but still lagging behind the civil service data when we looked at PSR worker representation. So really wondered what you think is holding disabled candidates back from contingent work and how we can tackle it.
Definitely. Thank you again for having me on this panel discussion. So I'm Natalie Taylor. I'm the diversity specialist here at PSR, and my role really is to support inclusive hiring and best practice within DEI across PSR sourcing. So it's a really good question, and we've been looking at it really closely. And as you've shared, looking at our own data from the diversity benchmarking report, 6% of our PSR respondents identified as disabled this year, which was the same as last year, no change. But that's twice the private sector. but it's also lower than the civil service, where representation ranges from 11 to 19%. And what's really telling is that around 2/3 of disabled respondents at PSR said their condition directly impacts their work. In terms of your question around what's holding disabled candidates back, I think the big one that we hear quite a lot is around job security and financial stability. So contingent roles can feel riskier, with some of the contract lengths potentially being shorter and not permanent roles, which can be a barrier if you're already managing, a complex health condition potentially. Concerns around reasonable adjustments. So candidates can worry whether clients will be willing or able to make reasonable adjustments for contract roles. Processes that aren't as accessible as they could be. So things like complex application systems or rigid interview formats can exclude people before they've even got a chance to shine. And also stigma. There's still hesitation to share a disability for fear it could affect opportunities. And I think in terms of how we tackle that, for me, things like our guaranteed interview scheme, which makes sure disabled candidates meet the criteria, are given a fair chance and are offered an interview with their end hiring manager. Support, so making sure that our processes and documents are accessible and working with clients upfront to ensure adjustments are in place. And also data-led insights. So we're building funnel reporting so that we can pinpoint exactly where in the process our candidates from all backgrounds might be dropping out of the process, and then work with customers to actively remove those barriers. And also as well, changing mindset. So we use our training and partnerships with the alliance partners to show clients the value that disabled candidates bring and how they can build inclusivity into contingent hiring. But Jane might have some more expert insight that she might want to add to that.
No, that's great, Nat. Thank you. And I know you do so much work on PSR to continue to drive disability representation, and continually evolving our programs. And I think, the different touch points that we have for those groups. But, rightly so, Jane, you're our expert in the field. If you could tell us who you are, a little bit more about your organisation, if there's anything you'd add to what Natalie said there about tackling, disabled worker representation within the contingent community.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I'm Jane Hatton and I'm founder and CEO of Even Break. We're a global disability inclusion partner. We have a job board and we also offer training and consultancy. And everybody at Even Break has lived experience of disability. So everything we do is delivered and designed by people who have that personal experience. I think there are a number of reasons why contingent work particularly is challenging for disabled people. One is the complications around benefits, because once you come off benefits and then your contract ends, you've got to go back on benefits. That can be a very lengthy process. So you can be quite insecure financially for a while. I think the other one, as Natalie said, is around getting workplace adjustments. And we know that Access to Work, for example, which is a government scheme that offers support for things like assistive technology or support workers or whatever it might be, the waiting list is very, very long now. There's a delay sometimes of up to a year. So it may be that somebody who goes on to a contract doesn't get their workplace adjustments until the contract ends, which means they can't perform in the way that they would want to and that they should. But also, I think there's something, and there's not much we can do about that. Those are both government opportunities and initiatives. But I think one of the things that we've discovered about disabled candidates is that they are very wary about the jobs that they apply to, because most employers will say we are equal opportunities employers and we are inclusive employers, but actually when it comes to disability, many aren't. And a lot of our candidates have said, we've gone for jobs and they've said they're inclusive employers, but actually in reality, they're not very inclusive around disability. And so I think one of the things that can really help there is for public sector employers to be really specific about the fact that they welcome disabled candidates, and not just to assume if somebody wants the job, they'll apply for it. They may want the job, but they may think, well, what's the point in applying because they don't want me anyway? And so actually to be really explicit in job advertising about we're looking for people with those additional talents, like as somebody mentioned before, somebody with autism who might be really good at certain tasks, or anybody who is disabled has to navigate around barriers, every day of our lives. And that brings additional skills like problem solving, creative thinking, determination, project management, all of which are really useful to public sector employers. But sometimes, we're not seen as good as other candidates. We actually talk about our candidates as premium candidates. So I think it's about changing the way we think about disabled people. Very much as Andy said, this is about talent. It's not just about underrepresentation. It's about getting talent into the public sector that represents the people they're there to serve. So there's a lot that we can do, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, Jane. I mean, completely hear you on that. And, when we think about it with that intersectional lens, for example, someone who's both neurodivergent and say, from a lower socioeconomic background or, perhaps female. I mean, how can employers better support intersectional talent?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we very much advocate for in the disability world is asking candidates and then new recruits, what do you need in order to be able to thrive here? And I think that's a really good starting point for any candidate, any new recruit, and not making the assumption about, well, who's disabled and who isn't, but actually very much around what can we do to make sure that you thrive in this organisation, or what can we do to make sure that you shine in this recruitment process? And instead of thinking about it as a legal requirement for disabled candidates, we should be thinking about, we actually want all of our candidates to shine in the recruitment process so that we can choose the best one. And we want all of our employees to thrive in our organisations because they'll be more productive, they'll be happier, they're less likely to leave, less likely to have time off sick. And so instead of actually thinking about, is this person disabled? Is this person trans? Is this person from a low socioeconomic background? It's really having a discussion about, so what do you need us to do as an organisation to make sure that all of your needs are met? And that might be around disability, but it might be around parental leave, or it might be about dress code, or it might be about all sorts of, flexible working, all sorts of things. So I think it's about looking at each individual is going to be unique, regardless of as whether they come from one of the legal protected characteristics or not. And we want everybody to feel safe and able to work. And I think intersectionality means we don't have to worry too much about which protected characteristics does this person tick. It's more about how can we make sure that everybody in the organisation gets what they need in order to be as productive as they can.
Yeah, I mean, I love that way of thinking, Jane, and I think that's really about a mindset shift, isn't it? As you say, it's taking it away from the legal responsibility of a reasonable adjustment to actually how can we make sure that everybody feels like they belong in this organisation, that they're included, that they've got the things that they need to really make the workplace a success for everybody. So, Andy, have you got something else to add there? You're on mute, sorry, Andy.
Yeah, just building on all of the excellent commentary that Nat and Jane provided, I just wanted to, for a second, zero in on organisations and their strategic intent around inclusion. And our experience shows us, and I think the others on today's panel will say similar, that often there's a very big disconnect between what the strategic intent is at the highest echelons of the organisation by the time it reaches the local teams who are actually recruiting. And I think the higher echelons of organisations have to be prepared to equip the recruiting teams to actually bring in all of this individual talent. And to do that, they may have to change age-old policies and procedures in order to make sure that that talent that Jane and Nat has spoken about have a level playing field and can therefore give of their best at interview stage and throughout the recruitment process.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, Andy, because we often see that disconnect, don't we, between, what the organisation wants to achieve and then actually what, we see in practicality through, hiring managers and recruiting teams. So, yeah, no, I hear you on that one. let's just take a different lens on this then, Emily. I'd really like to hear from you about the military community. Within the data, we can see the military spouses and veterans are a really small but growing group in the PSR talent pools. And we'd really love to hear what you think is needed to shift the dial further, maybe what examples you've seen. But first, please do tell us a little bit about you, your organisation.
Hello everyone, my name's Emily Hartshorn. I work for RFS, or Recruit for Spouses. We are a team of military spouses that support our military community. That could be if you're a partner of someone that is currently serving, or wife or husband, and also the children and anyone linked to the military community. So we help people gain confidence and get back into the workplace using both soft skills and hard skills. So we have lots of programs out there to help build our community up, and a community that I myself have been part of since the age of 16. And what I found really interesting about the PSR report was that actually there is a targeted initiative there towards the military families, and it has got better. And even though the military community is still very much underrepresented in this community that we're talking about here, there is a growth, and there was a growth. What we need to look at here is military families in general and the changes that happens within a military community. You had 2% of the talent pools being military spouses, only 0.1% being military spouses themselves. Well, over 14,000 people leave the military every year. So that is a massive pool of people that just aren't being tapped into in an effective way. And we also need to look at kind of the cross-contamination of what people are. Military spouses are primarily, 90% of them are female. So you need to look at that element as well, the cross-section between disabilities, between ethnicities, between eco-standards. It's not just keeping the military people and the community as military people. We could all cross over here between Andy and Jane and myself, and we're probably talking quite a lot about the same communities, but just with different needs that need to be tweaked. And I think the wording is very different within the military. We use our own language, and our language isn't very seen in the civilian world. But actually acknowledging those language differences as a hiring person could really help get that talent pool in. So let's not kind of look at what the company can offer the military community, but what the military community is actually offering to companies, and look at it in that way, because there's so much the underprivileged people within our community. And I hate saying that, because we're not underprivileged. We offer so much, and we have so many massive group talent pool in our community that actually you'd be surprised the amount of talent that there is willing to be picked at. So I think that underrepresentation of military community in the company was something that I really looked at and was a bit like, oh, okay, we need to put more effort into picking those people and really seeing what they have to offer, not the boundaries or what we need to put in place to help them get there, because they're willing and they want.
Yeah, for sure. And do you know what? I think that all leans back into what Jane said earlier, doesn't it? About, what do you need to thrive in this role? Because, when we think about military spouses, they perhaps need to have work that's more remote, because they might be, living in a remote location, or they might be, reposted, or moving physical locations periodically. But when you've got a role that's fully remote, or that that they're able to do remotely, that can support the continued employment, and therefore make them more engaged when it comes to the workplace. I guess not engaged, I think that's the wrong word, but just making the workplace more inclusive for those individuals.
You have to be careful with when we say military community, because we have 3 different services, and they all have different needs and wants. So for example, the Royal Navy, normally you get based in one place. Your serving personnel may move ships, but normally it's one base. Whereas the army can be very different in itself, and regiments can move every 2 years, and that person in that family would need a remote working role to stay long term. However, some regiments stay in place for long periods, like 6 to 10 years. So even though we're saying the military community needs remote working or needs this, that's not always the case. And that's what we need to be mindful of, is not painting everyone with the same brush, and take that person of what they need and adapting it to that person, not the broad spectrum of the whole community, because every community is different. And to assume that they're going to move every 2 years, we moved quite often, but not everyone does. I know people that have been in the same base their whole career, and because they chose to stay in one location over the development of their husband or partner. And some people live away from their partner so that their family is stable. So there's those options as well. So just because someone is a military spouse, partner, or in a military community doesn't necessarily mean that they have barriers in place also.
So coming to you now, Chance. In the report, we only saw that 32% of respondents came from a lower socioeconomic background. And I really wanted to get your opinion on what can be done to open up pathways for these candidates into contingent roles. And obviously, before you answer, tell us your name, your organisation, a little bit about yourself. But yeah, really keen to get your thoughts.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me here. I'm Chance, the partner support manager and all that evangelist for anything to do with changing lives for Bridge of Hope careers. Bridge of Hope is we have a platform, a jobs board, but we don't like to see ourselves as a jobs board. We have that as a functionality, but we're a strategic partner out there. We've got about 87 diverse candidates registered, looking for work up and down the UK, and access to about three-quarters of a million worldwide, globally, with our partnership with Jobs for Humanity. So we really are specialising in getting people into jobs from system impacted groups. Now, looking at the question, 32% of respondents from low socioeconomical backgrounds responding, that's of no surprise to me, because people from low socioeconomical backgrounds, they have competing priorities in their life. There's cost and time restraints that they have to deal with. There's always a lack of awareness in those spaces as well. And there's also that distrust of institutions. Some people, it hasn't worked for them for many years. They haven't seen it work for their parents, etc. And the roots go back so far that people just don't have that trust in the system. So when you're saying, can you come in, do a bit of research stuff with us? A lot of the time people are thinking that, yeah, this has never benefited me before, it might not benefit. So it's about having to try and sort of convince these groups that things are changing. But what's most important is that things are changing, and making some moves and really reaching out to them. The other thing is finding them where they are, and not expecting that they're going to be on LinkedIn and places like that, Total Jobs or whatever it is. Because for most people who are system impacted, that didn't work for them. So they're not there. And so what we found is to think outside the box a little bit, and then you can find them where they are. My poor partner's autistic, as I've spoken about previously in conversations, and as could never get jobs through those traditional pathways. And I know she gave up on those popular spaces. And she set up a group, Autistic Girls Network, things like that. And so we started looking in those places. We found them in groups, we found them in forums, we even found them on Spotify, listening to podcasts about how rubbish it is trying to get a job with autism. And that's when you can actually say, right, we've found, let's use technology like how programmatic media, what we use, let's get a great understanding of the tags and data points connected to system impacted groups, find them where they are and bring them back to the table successfully in that way, rather than expecting if I put a poster up here on LinkedIn, they'll see it and they'll come in to do this research. So that's a really important thing to completely understand, and then to consider all the other things as well, like, the health inequalities from people of low socioeconomical backgrounds and things like that. So again, that taps into what's a priority. And I can tell you, coming from a low socioeconomical background myself, when the telephone rings, we worry. It's not, oh, this could be good news. It's someone's in trouble, someone needs help, and it's a constant trying to support each other in those spaces through lack of funds, lack of resources, etc. So the ones of us who do find themselves in spaces where they can access various things, the group behind who are trying, they bank on you to open some doors or try to do some of things. So there's lots to consider in this space.
Yeah, no, I really hear that, and I think you've really brought to life the challenges and the fears that come from individuals in those groups, but also the kind of innovation that you've seen in the market and how those candidates can be accessed, which is great to hear. I was kind of interested to hear what you think about the role that partnerships can play in creating more kind of inclusive and equitable outcomes when it comes to recruitment processes and hiring.
Yeah, absolutely. We've always partnered. We see ourselves as partners. We don't see ourselves as having clients. Partnering is absolutely important because only in coalition can you really shift and make some shifts, make some changes take place. As an example, where although we support and help a whole wide range of different system impacted groups, one of the groups that we're leaning into a bit now is those who are justice impacted, and so actually, how does a partnership really support this with an employer? So we keep the partnership with the charity that does all the hand holding, etc., link them into the process with the employer so that they know when they get the candidates, they've got that support from the charities. But we haven't just done that. We partner with coaches so that they can have what we call a grit to great coach. And that coach will talk to the hiring manager, line manager, understand the organizational culture, and then relay that back to the candidate, align them with that organizational culture, teach them all the corporate etiquettes they need and to boost this emotional intelligence along that journey, and stick with them the whole way through 6 months to a year into the job. That takes the pressure away from internal sources to say, I don't want to offend this group, I don't know what to say. All that anxiety is out the window. You talk to the coach, he'll liaise and deal with everything. And that's partnerships, like 3 different angles to create an end-to-end solution for hiring justice impacted talent, for instance. And so it's just thinking about that. We're doing the same sort of thing for women in tech. So looking at cohorts, so might be taking a cohort of 3 or 5 people as a cohort with the support from the charities, the grit to great coach, same thing again. And not just say, right, we've got them for this particular job, just get them in and then find out where they're best suited, particularly if they've got different neurodivergence and intersectionalities. Say, right, let's try this person, they're dyslexic, let's try them in the marketing team because we know people with dyslexia have that creative mind, etc. And so that's the real sort of power of sort of thinking completely differently in this space and thinking about how partnerships can really make a massive difference and reduce any anxiety that anyone might have in hiring system impacted people.
Yeah, no, it makes absolute sense, doesn't it? We're not all experts in everything, and that's why it's great to have those partnerships and those support systems, people that, are organizations that have experience in maybe recruiting, candidates that maybe you haven't been able to reach before, so that you can better support them and, make sure your workplace is inclusive and, accessible to everyone. So
yeah, and
I totally hear that.
I'd love to, sorry to cut you, I really want to chip in with this quickly because I've listened to everyone in the panel have discussions about the different candidates, veterans, people with neurodivergence, mental health, disabilities, over 50. Every single one of these people from these groups, they've built up levels of grit, resilience, emotional intelligence, the ability to improvise in tough situations and perseverance. These are all the top predictors of career success. So it's very right that we stop looking at this through altruistic eyes and actually see for what these people bring to the table. We're really missing a trick here. Retention will spike by 50%. you get better retention with these groups. They are much more loyal, they work harder, productivity goes up. And this is not my words, this is CIPT, this is business in the community, this is research done. So hiring these candidates is a really great commercial thing to do as well.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I've seen so much research like that myself. It's I think when you really understand it, you can see as you said, the predictors of success, and the why not, hey?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
No, makes sense. Thank you so much, Chance.
Pleasure.
And Natalie, just before we finish, I know obviously you're, a diversity specialist at PSR, and I really just wanted to kind of close on, what are we doing as PSR to support our candidates and our customers, and how are we going to kind of continue to shift the dial when it comes to DEIB on this framework?
Thanks. Yeah, I think at PSR, our approach to DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is really embedded into everything that we do. So for us, it's about creating fair access to opportunities and actively removing those barriers, not just for candidates, but for customers as well. So one of the initiatives I'm really proud of, and we've kind of mentioned this, referenced this a little bit already, is our guaranteed interview scheme. So this supports disabled candidates, veterans, and their spouses, which many of our customers are signed up to support them with their commitments under the Disability Confidence Scheme and the Armed Forces Covenant, Employer Recognition Scheme. If they meet the minimum criteria, they're guaranteed an interview, which helps level the playing field and gives people a real chance to showcase their skills. But we also make a point of listening to candidate feedback. So that has really shaped how we improve our processes. Things like making documents more accessible, supporting reasonable adjustments during recruitment, and really advocating for our candidates. Small changes like that can make a huge difference to someone's experience. And also, we're starting to use the data that we do collect in a more powerful way. So, for example, we're building funnel reporting, which will support our customers to see exactly where candidates face stumbling blocks in the recruitment process. That means we can take targeted action and really move from good intentions to real impact. And it's not really just about us, it's about supporting our customers as well with their DEI ambitions. So sharing those insights from the funnel reporting, we will then be able to help them see where barriers might exist in the process. And then we can work together on solutions tailored to the customer's goals so they can build more inclusive workplaces as well. Training is another huge part of what we do. So we're partnering with our experts to deliver sessions on topics like age inclusion, barriers to employment, accessibility. These sessions give both our teams and our customers the tools to create inclusive environments. But we just don't want to be just a sourcing provider. So we want to be a trusted partner, as Chance has touched on, helping to build workplaces where everyone feels they belong and can thrive.
Yeah, no, it makes absolute sense, Natalie. And I know you've done, a lot of work looking at how our, individual customer data compares to our benchmarking report this year already. So, there's lots of ways, I think, as you've mentioned, that we can support our customers in helping to build those, D&I strategies for contingent with your support and the support sourcing team. So thank you. So to our quickfire round, Natalie, I'll come to you first. What is one myth you'd like to bust about D&I data, and one action every public sector hiring manager should take tomorrow?
I think that everyone has touched on this quite nicely, but I think for me, one myth is to bust is around what you see on a piece of paper and a CV. I want people to stop focusing purely on what they see on that piece of paper. There is so much research and data to prove, and also things like our guaranteed interview scheme that has proven time and time again that if you give people the opportunity to showcase their skills in a way that works for them, whether that you're part of the part of the disability community, whether you're a veteran, whether you're a military spouse, whether you are socio-economic impacted or justice impacted, to actually remove the barriers of having a stringent one-size-fits-all approach to hiring is what enables people to kind of shine and bring them their best selves to the table. So for me, I think the call to action there is to be looking at your hiring process and remove those strict processes that put people into one box, and to tick all of the boxes for your role. Look at these people as individuals who need their own opportunity and a way to shine. I think it's probably a nice way of summarising it. Give everyone fair and equal opportunity by allowing them to kind of bring their best selves.
But I think the myth for me is we consider often as a society disabled people as somehow less than in terms of talent than non-disabled people. And that's not the case. We know that actually in reality, disabled people can be just as productive, have less time off sick, bring additional skills with them. As I say, because we have to navigate around disabling barriers every day, we actually naturally develop all sorts of other skills. And so my one sort of action that I would recommend to hiring managers, to public sector organisations, is to make it really explicit in your advertising that you welcome disabled talent. One obvious way of doing that is by advertising your roles on a specialist disability job board. I have to declare an interest there because I run one. But if you come to Even Break or any other specialist job board, candidates will see that if an organisation has paid to advertise to that particular demographic, they are really genuine about wanting that talent. So don't just assume that disabled people will come to you if they just want the job. They really need to know that you want their talent and that you'll support them when you get there.
I think I kind of already said it about the not quoting all military families the same. When you have that military community and a military spouse comes to you, that it really does matter which regiment, which part of the military they're in. If it's the Navy, the Army, or the RAF, they all have different needs and wants to get them back into the workplace. And it can be difficult as a military spouse to put your life around your partner and put them first for a long period of time. But you will find the military spouse wanting and giving more, because we look after and run our homes. We run a life without partners, and we have so much to offer. And you'd be surprised just the massive amount of expertise that we hold. We can hold on, and we are loyal people. So it is a great talent pool to be looking at.
So the one myth that I would like to bust about DE&I, and specifically around age, is that we need to move away from this sense that it's a nice to have or it's a nice thing to do, rather than actually it's a real commercial imperative. For example, it's known fact that intergenerational teams report a 288% uplift in financial performance, according to a recent Gartner study. So let's move away. Let's move the agenda from thinking that diversity and inclusion is a nice thing to do, and actually see the real, true people, commercial and customer benefits that are contained within inclusive hiring. In terms of one action that I would like to see every public sector hiring manager take tomorrow, I would suggest that they should look at what percentage of new hires in the last 12 months were over 50. Given, as we said earlier, that within a very short period of time, 50% of the workforce are going to be aged 50 plus. If it's anything under 25% of all hires, you are in danger of being totally mismatched against the market, and very obviously missing a huge talent pool.
I think that there's so many myths actually to pick from, but I'm going to really pick one from the hardest reach group, and that is those who are justice impacted. There's this myth about trust, and it's just not true. I think it was Timpson's was asked a question in Daily Mail He said, so let's address the elephant in the room. What about theft from the groups? They hire, about 30% or whatever it is from the criminal justice system. And he said, yes, absolutely. He said, do we have theft? He said, yes, absolutely, we do have theft, but it's never from this group. They just don't do it. And I said to someone recently, I said, if this was happening in organizations that are hiring from these groups, we know so many are now, and they were stealing and doing all this other stuff, it would be in the Daily Mail. I mean, the media would be all over it. We know what our media is like. They wouldn't let something like that slide. The reason why it's not all over the news is because it's not happening. And people really need to go and look at those stats, and they'll find that, for me, poverty is the mother of crime. And a lot of people are left with stark choices, and that is to either become a vagrant or to tap into the hustle economy. The reason why they stay, don't steal, and their lives change when you give them a job is because that's all they ever wanted, that opportunity to shine just like everyone else. So that's certainly a myth that I like everyone to really look at. And, we do a session called Dine with Conviction, where we take execs into Brixton prison, into a restaurant called a Clink. We give them a high impact keynote speech, etc., and they can actually see and feel that in that environment. And that really will make a change. Now, for hiring managers, I believe every hiring manager out there at this point needs a mindset shift. And it's through no fault of their own. You've got all these ED&I, social mobility, all these initiatives coming through. And the hiring managers, they've been doing the same thing they've been doing for 5, 10, 15 years. No one's given them a toolkit to do anything any different. So one of the things that I would urge hiring managers to do is to jump onto sessions that offer that type of mindset shifting programs. We obviously have one that we work in partnership with in the Alliance. We have the Mindset Makeover, and it's as a 90-minute session, and we're able to take data through the whole session. We've been able to show at the end of that session 98% mindset shifts, with 74% saying that a strong mindset shift. And we don't leave them high and dry there. They get a toolkit at the end of it. So it's about providing them with these tools to do that. So they get all the interview questions you could dream of to ask around the predictors of success, grit, resilience, emotional intelligence, etc., and apps and all of that. So I think we should really consider, what can we do for the hiring managers to get them to have that mindset shift, but to also give them the tools to go ahead and hire from these groups with a lot more confidence. Because a lot of the time they're up against the clock and things like that. So this is a really powerful thing. So anyone out there who's doing social mobility initiatives, EDI and all those things, you ask around, it will fall down at the hiring manager unless that hiring manager's mindset is shifted.
We've heard from all of our partners now, and before we finish, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to you all for joining us, sharing your expertise and your insights. And I know you've all really helped shape the report and the discussion today. I think as we close, there's one thing that's really clear, and that's that, this report is giving us the evidence and the data, but it really is what we do with it that matters.
Yeah.
I hope that today's discussion has helped bring that data to life and offered some inspiration and practical insights into how we can move the dial collaboratively with our customers when it comes to DEIB. If you'd like to discuss any of the insights from today in more detail, or would like to look at your individual contract and authority contingent workforce data, or even explore how our alliance partners can support you in achieving your DEIB goals across, contingent and permanent hiring, then get in touch with me using the email address psrsocialvalueteam@weareams.com.